All right. Now I would like to introduce the speakers for our social equity session. Social equity is an often overlooked yet important part of sustainability. They will discuss the work they do to preserve the history and heritage of Newtown through Newtown Alive. Remember to think of questions and enter them into Mentimeter after the last speaker. First, we will hear from Vicki Oldham. The Sarasota resident is a storyteller and journalist who has produced multiple community-themed documentaries and shorts. Her latest work is a groundbreaking preservation project called Newtown Alive. Begun as an initiative to trace the 100-year history of the African-American community of Newtown, it allowed residents and guests to view the neighborhood through the lens of its rich history. Then we'll hear from Walter Gilbert and Shelia Atkins. Walter Gilbert is no stranger to community engagement and activism. He accompanied his mother to Newtown community meetings as a child, witnessing neighbors and family friends articulate their vision for neighborhood improvement. Walter eventually became a Sarasota NAACP president and continues to push for social justice and equality. Shelia Atkins has resided in Sarasota for more than 6 decades, and she and her husband, former Sarasota Mayor Fred Atkins, are active members of the community. A paraprofessional aide at Alta Vista Elementary, Shelia attended high school in Sarasota during integration. Let's welcome Vicki Oldham.
Thank you so much. Thank you, organizers, for inviting me here. Our program is a little different. We're talking about sustaining a community through historic preservation. Social equity. I can't say that I really understood what that term meant until I talked with the organizers. All I know is that we did not want to lose our community to gentrification. And so some of us asked, what does Newtown have? Does it have any assets? What are its assets? And we came up with this answer. Our stories are our assets. Stories then became the foundation of everything that the Newtown Alive project is. And so through storytelling, we'd like to recast the brand, if you will, the image of Newtown. I want to thank Fred Atkins for his persistence in trying to find money to preserve this history. What happened is this: he became the first African-American city commissioner, and he went out into his community to ask his constituents, what do you want me to do? What should my priorities be? And they said, preserve our history. Because they had looked to the location of the first African-American community of Overtown, and they saw what had happened to it. You know Overtown as the Rosemary District. And so some hallmark items that show that a neighborhood is gentrifying, and this is happening around the country. The name changes. The name of Overtown changed to Rosemary District. Residents slowly were enticed to move out of the community. That's what happened in Overtown. Suddenly, the community becomes safe. There's police presence, things get fixed, sidewalks, traffic lights that were out, they get fixed, and then a school comes in, and then the quality of education changes in the community. That is exactly what happened in Overtown. And so, yes, the residents of Newtown see gentrification coming, and it's not that we think that it won't happen in Newtown, but what we have said is this: development is coming. Let's make sure that our identity is preserved. And so that defines what Newtown Alive is doing, because you see, our history was available only in fragments a sentence in one book, a paragraph in another, a photograph with a cut line, but nobody had comprehensively documented the history of the African American community. We thank those who did include us in the books that I, just told you about, that are on the shelf at the Sarasota County Public Library. But there's more to the story than a cut line or a photograph or a caption. And so when we got $50,000 from city demolition funds, $50,000 started this project, we started digging for this history everywhere we could. We found it in the garages of people, in boxes, cardboard boxes. There were photographs everywhere. Photographs like this. And I had some specific deliverables. The city said phase 1 should be a research report, oral history interviews, an inventory of historic resources, meaning buildings, like the Masonic Lodge, like the churches, like the homes. And so I hired some people that you might know, Dave Baber and Chris Wenzel, and they did some windshield surveys, and we have an inventory of historic structures for that phase 1. And we also put out a call in the community and found these watercolor paintings at the William Hartman Gallery on Palm Avenue. Turns out that in the 50s, artists would go out into our community and paint scenes, what they saw, and these paintings were very, very helpful to us in piecing Newtown's story together. And there's a 1950s prom gown. But with these stories told through oral history interviews, we could put that research report together, and we could leverage those stories. So phase 2 are historic markers, and we have 15 of them throughout the Newtown community. 15 historic markers that tell a story, just like that one. The man that's at the bottom is Leonard Reed, and I'm connected to that Leonard Reed story. Well, many of us, thousands of little children in Newtown are connected to Leonard Reed, who was the right-hand man to Sarasota's first mayor, Colonel John Gillespie. We have a book. We have a website, www.newtownalive.org, that's chock full of information. We have a mobile app. We have, what else do we have? Oh, we have Trolley Tours. We have Trolley Tours, and Jetson Grimes has opened up a photo gallery. And to further our brand, we asked Ringling College students to design a t-shirt. It's not designed like your typical t-shirt where the message is on the front and on the back panel. A student decided to play with our logo and put the sunburst on the side and the Newtown Alive above the lapel. I love this t-shirt. It's so much sexier than what I designed. We have educational programs. We partnered with the West Coast Black Theater Troupe and presented to 4th graders a show about flamingos and gators in a pond, talking to kids about racism and discrimination. The alligators own this pond, and they wouldn't let the flamingos inside the pond. That's a video that I don't have time to show. We'll go on. We have some projects in the works. I'm so excited to show you this. This is our next step, and the city of Sarasota has given us a seed grant of $200,000 to develop an African American Arts Center and History Museum. Yes. To house all of these research sources that we found. And so University of Florida students designed 6 charrettes. And these are their designs, actually. We have an architect that's actually working to come up with the design that we're going to use. But we're getting the community involved through painting projects. We paint historic houses, and that was a really, really wonderful one. And we're just wanting to show these stories to tear barriers down and to bring diverse communities together and to collaborate, and we want healing to happen in our community. And with that, I'd bring up Walter and Shelia Atkins, who will help me tell the rest of the story, because they are so instrumental in fanning out into the community to give public talks. Like this week, we did a public talk at Ringling Museum, and they're called Collecting Recollections. And I get to sit up on a stage on a nice set with one of the history makers, such as Shelia. Come on up. I'm talking while I'm hoping that you're walking up. I get to interview them at length, maybe for about 40, 45 minutes about their stories. Okay. You going back? Okay. And so it is, it's so revealing, because it allows the community to peer into parts of history that we don't ordinarily know. And I'll tell you this story has been transformative for my life, because I didn't grow up during the time that Walter and Shelia did, and my grandparents hid my little eyes from the ugliness that was happening here in the 50s and the 60s. But they are here, and they shared their stories with me, and I'm, through these oral history interviews, finding out more about them. But I'd ask Walter, but why do you think, Walter, this project is so important? We are being very intentional in telling the stories by any means necessary, using any format, traditional, non-traditional, by any means necessary, but some of it is happening organically. It's just kind of flowing. So talk about that Dorothy Smith project that you enterprised.
Good morning. The Dorothy Smith thing that we're doing, Dorothy Smith was a educator in our community. In fact, she's my 6th grade teacher. And Sheila's too. We're classmates. She was a very instrumental, when we're talking about sustainability. When schools were segregated, the black schools taught us our history. They taught us things that came up, that they came through, that their parents came through, that my parents came through, and they relayed that to us. So that part of sustainability was important. But once schools got integrated, the curriculum changed. And a lot of the stuff that we got was no longer shared. But Mrs. Smith happened to become the first black principal in an integrated school system here in Sarasota County. So she kind of took that with her, because that was her makeup. And she became the principal over at Southside Elementary School. Mrs. Smith is no longer with us. She passed a couple years ago. And I just got the idea that this lady needed to be remembered, and remembered where she eventually ended her educational career, which was at Southside Elementary. So we approached the school board, asked them to recognize her and what we could do, and they totally agreed. And we're in the process of raising money for a memorial plaque that will be on the wall at Southside Elementary School. So that's what we're working on there. And that's part of what I think our sustainability thing is, and what we're doing through what Vicki described, is keeping that history for everybody. Because what you don't know, you can't use, and what you don't know sometimes can hurt you, and it can hurt you on a larger scale. And by sharing the story with everybody, where everybody knows what happened and what it does and what it does to next generations is great, I think.
Thank you.
Say something?
Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you. About Mrs. Smith. She was our 6th grade teacher, and also I was there present at Southside Elementary School the year she was, had taken the principalship. That was a day I remember crying, because that was a monumental move in our society, the first African-American principal. And she was my 6th grade teacher. We cried together.
Before Mrs. Smith died,
Say something right quick.
so you know what's going to happen. This always does. Walter rests the mic.
You know, when you get older, your brain triggers and stuff just comes up. Then you got to say it while
Right
you
then.
still got it.
Amen.
So what Sheila was saying, and as far as Mrs. Smith at Southside, she ended up being the principal when my kids were there. So, the clock and everything keeps rolling, and it runs together. And it runs together sometimes very well.
I got to say this. You've caused me to forget. Dorothy Smith was interviewed. I interviewed her before she passed away. And so I'm working to turn these oral history interviews into podcasts. 10 of them are on our website now. People that Walter and Shelia and myself knew, not the first president of the NAACP, but the second president of the NAACP, John Rivers. But Walter, talk about why we're in such a hurry to get these stories out and to get these stories told. Age has something to do with it.
Age has everything to do with it. And, I wake up and look in the mirror, I go, who's that guy? But yes, that's why we're in a hurry, because people like Mrs. Smith are leaving. A lot of this history that we're talking about is just that, oral. A lot of it wasn't recorded, or a lot. When I approached the school board with this idea, no one there even remembered her. But she was a history maker here, and that wasn't that long ago. I mean, I look this way, but I was in 6th grade, was not that long ago. So that's why we're in a hurry, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
And also, too, I don't know, as I get older, I've seen some people that I know dealing with dementia and those sorts of health issues, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I better hurry up and do what I've got to do before I can't do it anymore. And so I've got to use these gifts and these talents that I feel are God-given to tell these stories, so that, while I can tell them. Now, you must know that black labor built Sarasota's infrastructure, its roads, its bridges, condos, and so forth. And yes. But there are few monuments to these African-American workers. I mean, I was at St. Armand's over the weekend for the art show, and I saw John Ringling standing there, full-figured and all with dignity. Well, we want some monuments to our figures, our historic figures who changed this community forever. The Neil Humphrey Seniors, and the John Rivers, and the Dr. Ed James, and the Sheila Sanders. But we do have brick and mortar structures that are named after our pioneers, but a lot of them are in our community. Well, some of you may never come into the Newtown community. So that's why it's important what you're doing, putting that monument up about Dorothy Smith that's outside of the Newtown community, because Robert L. Taylor is named after one of our pioneers. Emma E. Booker, the schools are named after her, but they're right there in the African American community. We have Fred Atkins Park right there in the community, but black labor built all of Sarasota, not just that isolated, sometimes considered Newtown community. You want to weigh in?
Yes, and most of you know my husband, Fred Atkins. I'm his wife. And he was the first elected black official in Sarasota County on the city commission back in 1986. Also, when he was on the commission, he cares about our community. But one thing that he strives on, I know you visited St. Armand's Circle, the ring of the circles. There is an African American that is on one of those circles, Junior Ruffin, who worked in the circus as a lion tamer. And my husband fought hard for him while he was living to be a part of that ring, because not only were they part of the circus, but they needed to be recognized as also. So Junior Ruffin, that was another moment I cried, to see him when they dedicated that ring to him. And not too long after that, he passed. And it's always good to give honor to people while they're living, if possible. Just like Miss Betty Jean Johnson, who the North Sarasota Public Library is named after. And I'm glad to say I was part of that push at the county commission as well. But hey, go out and visit. Now you know Junior Ruffin, who was a lion tamer in one of the circus too, is in that ring of circus.
Closing comments, Walter. I gave you the last word.
That don't happen often. But as far as what we're talking about and keeping with the sustainability thing, that's what we're trying to do, a little different than a lot of this other sustainability things you're going to hear about today. But this is important, not just for us, but for the entire community. Because when that works, the community works. When the community knows everything about the community and everybody that participates in the community works better. And I got to get a plug in. We have to raise funds for Mrs. Smith Memorial, so you can go to a GoFundMe page, Dorothy Smith Memorial Fund, and help us out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Sheila. One more.
I just want to say I'm a big sustainable person as far as gardens, the local gardens that is in our community. One at the public housing on Orange Avenue, the community garden and everything. And I used to work in the school system. I'm retired now. And my school, Alta Vista, we started a garden because it's all about training. And so if we train our youngsters early about recycling, growing our own food, they will be a great part. Questions?
All right, we're going to have you all move on that side of the stage, so maybe you can see the screen, and then I'll be able to see this screen, and we'll see if we can get some questions. Okay. Vicki, some questions about the museum and art center. What's the name of the architect you used? And can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Okay. I didn't bring a mic over here. Is it okay?
Oh, no, definitely take a mic.
Thank you. I'm so glad for that question. I am so proud to say that Juan Self is working with us on this Cultural Arts Center. And Juan Self was the architect for the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis at the Lorraine Hotel, where Dr. King was assassinated. And so where we are now with the project, with that $200,000, a board has formed and a nonprofit is official, and we're gathering community input on the location of that facility. Should it be inside the Newtown community or near the community or near the Rosemary district? Well, a lot of things are going to decide the location, and that is there city-owned land, and will the city deed us over the land for an inexpensive amount of money?
Can any of you address some environmental issues currently in Newtown? Anything that you're dealing with?
I guess the issues there is just land use more than anything. When they plotted Newtown, they wasn't thinking too much about land use at the time. And I mean, the homes, the lots are small, everything's close, and things are getting older and torn down. So we're just trying to figure out land use.
Anyone else want to take a shot?
What about after a big rain and drainage? I don't live in the Newtown community anymore, although I was born and reared at 3510 North Orange Avenue, right across from Booker High School. But you live there, and what about stormwater drainage and such?
Well, we have some, I live right across from Booker High School, so they did put in retention ponds there, 3 in that area and behind Booker High School. So the streets are not getting as flooded as they used to, but they still flood when we have a really downpour. Right there on my corner, it takes a while for the water to recede. I have to park my car. If not on the street, it will be flooded. It takes a minute, but they did do some making the floods better in our community. Still not 100% better, but they have gotten better.
Do you have any tips for small businesses to be more equitable?
Well, that's a big question for our area, because when integration happened, it was a one-way street for our businesses. You know, we couldn't go downtown and go in stores and try on clothes and try on shoes or things of that nature. So when integration happened, we as a community was happy to go downtown and do what everybody else had been doing forever, but no one came to our business district, which we had and which flourished during that time. And our business district kind of went away. But we're in the process of bringing that back. There's life on, it's MLK now, but it was 27th Street. So that's an ongoing situation in our community.
Vicki, you have the book that you've written and the T-shirts, and folks want to know where they might be able to access those.
On the website, www.newtownalive.org. Just keep scrolling and you'll be able to buy the book online. And email me at newtownalivesrq@gmail.com. And one of our volunteers will get back with you on anything and everything that you want to know about the trolley tours, about the T-shirts, or anything. Because here's what's happening with the trolley tours. I don't have a large staff at all. It's just me and Walter, Shelia when she has time. And so we're finding that this project is ballooning in ways that we had not anticipated. And so we need volunteers. But email us. I can do group tours and plug individuals into a group tour. And so let's do the tours that way until I can do more frequent tours, maybe a couple of tours a week. I'm not doing tours full time. I'm trying to build an African American Art Center and History Museum that will be here when I'm long gone. And I'm going to glory, by the way.
And you don't have to be black to be a volunteer.
That's right. Absolutely not. Thank you so much to Vicki, Walter, and
Thank you.
Shelia.
Mrs. Smith, Memorial Fund, GoFundMe.
Oh, you guys can come on through this way.